Welcome back, second graders. Today is Friday, May 8th, 2020. So we're going to jump into our next math lesson, and this math lesson is going to build on what we did yesterday. Yesterday in our lesson, we took rectangles and we partitioned them into rows, or we partitioned them into columns. Today, we're going to take a rectangle and we are going to partition them into both rectangles and columns. And then we'll have a chance to write some division number sentences that represent what that rectangle is showing us. So in order for you to be ready, what you need to do is grab something to write with, ideally a pencil if you have it, and then some scrap paper. Now, our problem solving task today has 3 parts, and you can see them up here on the screen. To be ready for part A, you're going to need to draw a rectangle just like I've drawn my rectangle here. So, part A says, divide this rectangle into 5 equal columns and 3 equal rows. That's what you'll do first. Then, part B, how many squares or units are now in this rectangle? And part C at the bottom, write 2 division sentences that represent this rectangle. So I want you right now to pause the video, and I want you to make sure you have time to solve part A, part B, and part C. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance now to solve your problem solving task, part A, part B, and part C, so we can jump in and go over these questions. So for the first part, part A, our job was to divide this rectangle into 5 equal columns and 3 equal rows. Now I'm going to start with the columns. You can start with the rows, you can start with the columns. It's really whatever is easiest for you. Now I know that if I have to divide the rectangle into 5 equal columns, that means I need to draw 4 lines from top to bottom, and they need to be about the same size. So we're going to do our best trying to take this rectangle and make 5 equal columns. Let's see. So the thinking that I'm doing for this is I know that if I draw a line right in the center, that would be half. And then if I take half of this side and half of this side, that would only give me 4 parts. So they need to be a little bit smaller than that. So thinking like here, 2 parts so far that are equal, 3 parts so far that are equal, 4 and 5. Now, they're not perfect, but they're pretty close. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. Now, I'm not going to label it inside each section like I did yesterday, and that's because not only do I have to divide it into columns, but I also need to divide it into rows, 3 equal rows. So this is the part that I'm going to do now. Rows go left to right, and dividing into 3 equal rows means I need to have 3 rows, or I'm dividing it into thirds. So I'm going to do my best to draw straight lines across. 1, 2. And now I have 1, 2, 3 equal rows. Some of you might have realized that this almost looks like an array, and you're right, it does look like an array with boxes. And we know that we can use arrays to not only write multiplication number sentences or solve multiplication problems, but we can also use an array to help us with a division word problem. So that's why we're practicing this here, because when you're dividing or partitioning shapes, especially rectangles, into rows and columns, you're able to write division number sentences that match and figure out the total number of squares that you have. This also might seem familiar for some of you when it comes to our morning work problems. We've had many morning work problems where our job has been to divide a pan of brownies into different sections so that a person can share them with their friends. This is a very similar type of problem. So this is what your this is what your rectangle should look like. 3 rows that go left to right and 5 columns that go up and down. Now we're ready for part B. Part B says, how many squares or units are now in this rectangle? Well, we can easily figure that out by counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's one way to count them. Some of you also probably thought you could count by threes because you have a group of 3 here and here, and you could skip count for 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. You could also skip count by fives. 5, 10, 15. Whatever way you skip counted is totally fine, or counted is fine. So we just figured out that there are 15 squares. Some people might even call these units. So this rectangle is made up of 15 units. Either is fine. Now I'm going to zoom out if I can a little bit, perfect, just to have a little bit more space for you guys. Now part C here is asking me to, now that I've partitioned my rectangle, now that I know the total number of squares, I need to come up with 2 division number sentences that represent this rectangle. Well, when I'm doing division, I know I'm starting with a total and splitting them up into groups. So if 15 is my total, my number sentences should both start with 15. And I'm going to just angle this a little bit. And I'm dividing them by. I'm going to divide my first one by my 5 columns, because that's what I did first, and then 3 rows. So 15 divided by 5 means I get 3. And then down here, 15 divided by 3 means I get 5. I know this is right because I know that 3 times 5 is 15 and 5 times 3 is also 15. Great. So that's your problem solving task today. We're going to continue practicing partitioning rectangles into rows and columns together. And then we are going to also write some division number sentences as well. So I'm going to zoom in to the top a little bit here. It's a little bit harder because I'm using my board today. So for this first problem, we're going to solve it together, this problem up here. So in order for you to be ready for this problem, what I need you to do is draw a rectangle just like I've drawn a rectangle up here. Okay, so part A says, partition this rectangle into 2 rows and 5 columns. Well, I'm going to start with my 2 rows. I know rows go left to right, and if I need to have 2 of them, that means I'm cutting this shape in half. So all I need to do is draw one line to cut it in half. So here's my first row and my second row. Wonderful. Now I have to divide it into 5 columns. Lucky for us, we practiced this in our problem solving task. So 5 columns means I need to draw 4 lines from top to bottom. So if this is half, I like to visualize in my head where the midpoint is, that halfway point, to try to get an idea of how big or how small it's going to be. So I'm thinking here would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And these columns are pretty much, I need to make sure they connect here, are pretty equal. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. So I follow those instructions, and now I just want to count to see how many squares I have. We can count by groups of 5, or we can count by groups of 2s. You could even count one at a time. Let's count by 5s. 5, 10. So the total number of squares is 10. Now I have to write 2 division number sentences. If I know that my total is 10, that means I need to start both number sentences with 10 divided by something equals something. 10 divided by 2 is going to get me 5. 2 rows, 5 columns. The other number sentence I could write would be 10 divided by 5 columns equals 2, my 2 rows. Awesome. Now I'm going to have you practice, and I'm going to put this up on the screen so you can see it. Let me erase my problem solving task. Awesome. Now I'm going to have you practice one on your own. So it's going to be very similar to what we just did together, and I'll zoom in for you. So your job here says part A, divide this rectangle into 8 rows and 3 columns. Think back to when we talked about dividing the rectangle yesterday in groups of 8 and that strategy that I told you that you could use to make it easier. And then for part B, write 2 division number sentences that represent this rectangle. Make sure to include the total number of squares. Awesome. So go ahead and solve for part A and part B. You'll definitely need to draw a rectangle on your page to show your work for this. So pause the video now and go ahead. Okay, hopefully you've had some time to solve that problem. What I'm going to do here is just get my board set up. I'm going to draw my rectangle as straight as I can. Awesome. There's my rectangle. Now this problem told me to divide the rectangle into 8 rows. I'm going to write that right here so we don't forget. And 3 columns. There we go. So you can see it, 8 rows and 3 columns. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to start with my 8 rows. Rows go left to right. Now yesterday we talked about that number 8. When I have to divide something into 8 groups, either 8 columns or 8 rows, I'm going to start by cutting the shape in half. And I can probably do a better job. If you have a pencil and you're doing this, you can use your eraser to try to be as accurate as possible. It's not a perfect science, you know, it's not perfect, but as accurate as you can. So now I have 2 rows, but I need 8. So I'm going to cut each of these parts in half again by drawing another line. Awesome. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I haven't gotten to 8 yet, but I know that I can cut each of these 4 parts in half again by drawing a line, and that will get me to my 8 rows. There you go, 8 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Awesome. Now I'm ready to divide it into 3 columns. That means 2 lines, so I have to do 3 columns. So let's see. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. So this picture here shows that I have 8 rows with 3 in each, or 3 columns with 8 in each. Now the next part that you had to do is you had to write 2 division number sentences that could represent this rectangle, but we also needed to include the total. So it's important for us to figure out what the total is. One way you could do that is you could skip count by 3s. There's a group of 3 here, and then another one all the way down to the bottom. So let's try that. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Fantastic. Some of you also might have practiced skip counting by 8s in your own spare time. That would be 8, 16, 24. So we know that we have 24 total squares. So now we're able to write some division number sentences. Starting with our total, of course. The first one would be 24 divided by 8 equals 3. 8 rows, 3 in each. The second one would be the opposite. 24 divided by 3 equals 8. 3 columns with 8 in each. Fantastic. So I hope that was helpful in terms of partitioning rectangles and into both columns and rows. Definitely it's a problem that if you have a pencil, it would help you out because you want to be as accurate as you can. And also this is another way for us to show our division. So right now is your time to go into the Seesaw activity and grab the exit ticket, pull it up, and when you have that pulled up, your job is going to be to solve that. When you're done, please upload your work so that your teacher can see it. Awesome. If you have any questions at all about anything we did today, please reach out to your teacher. Have a wonderful rest of your day, have a wonderful weekend, and I will be back on Monday with another video for you.